Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Our first story is titled,
My in-laws tried to make me quit my job and be a housewife. When I first met my husband, Tanner, I knew he was special. We connected instantly over our shared love of true crime podcasts and spicy food. After 2 years of dating, he proposed during a hike to our favorite overlook spot. I was over the moon and said yes without hesitation. What I didn't anticipate was the drama that would unfold with his family, especially his parents, in the months leading up to our wedding. Looking back, there were some red flags I probably should have noticed sooner. The first time I met Tanner's parents, Samuel and Margaret, was at a family dinner about 6 months into our relationship. They seemed nice enough at first, if a bit formal and traditional. Margaret kept asking me about my domestic skills. Did I know how to cook, clean, sew? I laughed it off at the time, thinking she was just trying to get to know me. When I admitted I wasn't much of a cook, Margaret's smile tightened. She made a comment about how I need to improve to be a good wife. I tried to change the subject, but throughout the evening, I noticed Samuel didn't seem very interested in my work or accomplishments. When I tried to share a story about a challenging project I recently completed, he quickly steered the conversation back to Tanner's job in finance. At the time, I chalked it up to first meeting jitters and gave them the benefit of the doubt. But as Tanner and I got more serious, his parents' traditional views became impossible to ignore. About a year into our relationship, Tanner and I decided to move in together. When we shared the news with his parents, their reactions were less than enthusiastic. They expressed their disapproval, with Samuel even implying that I was somehow tainted goods for living with a man before marriage. Tanner defended me, but the evening ended on a tense note. As our relationship progressed, it became clear his parents, especially his mom, had very specific ideas about what Tanner's future wife should be like, and I didn't fit the mold. Margaret would often make subtle digs at my career choices. When I mentioned a big presentation I was preparing for work, she'd sigh and say something like, "It's a shame you have to worry about such things. In my day, women focused on creating a loving home for their husbands." He'd send me links to articles about the importance of traditional gender roles in marriage, or forward emails about cooking classes for future homemakers. Each time the message was clear. She didn't approve of my career-oriented lifestyle. One particularly memorable incident occurred during a family barbecue at Tanner's parents' house. I had just received a promotion at work and was excited to share the news. When I announced it over dinner, Margaret's response was less than enthusiastic. "Oh, that's nice, dear," she said, her tone dismissive. "But don't you think you should be focusing on more important things, like starting a family?" I was taken aback by her blunt response. Tanner jumped in to defend me, but Samuel cut him off. "Your mother has a point, son," he said. "A woman's most important job is to be a wife and mother. All this career nonsense is just a distraction." The rest of the evening was painfully awkward. Tanner and I left early, both of us fuming at his parents' outdated attitudes. Things really came to a head after Tanner proposed and we started planning the wedding. What should have been an exciting, joyful time quickly turned stressful thanks to his parents' constant meddling and judgment. Margaret insisted on accompanying me to dress fittings, where she'd make backhanded comments about how certain styles were more flattering for career women's figures. She reminisced about hand-sewing her own wedding dress, heavily implying that my choice to buy off the rack somehow made me less dedicated to the marriage. During one particularly frustrating fitting, Margaret brought along her sister, my future aunt-in-law. As I tried on a sleek modern gown, she gasped in mock horror. "Oh, sweetie," she said, shaking her head, "don't you want something more bridal? This looks like something you'd wear to one of your work functions." I tried to explain that this was exactly the style I wanted, but Margaret chimed in. "Carol's right, dear. You want to look like a bride, not a businesswoman. Let's try on some of those lovely traditional gowns with long trains and veils." For the next hour, they forced me into increasingly poofy, ornate dresses that were completely at odds with my personal style. By the end of the appointment, I was close to tears and no closer to finding a dress I actually liked. When Tanner and I decided on a casual food truck catered reception, Samuel and Margaret were aghast. They started inviting their country club friends to the wedding without our permission, insisting we need a proper sit-down dinner to impress them. It took weeks of arguments before they finally backed down. Even our honeymoon plans weren't safe for their criticism. Tanner and I had decided on an adventurous backpacking trip through Southeast Asia. Margaret cornered me at a family dinner to express her concerns. "Darling," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "are you sure you want to spend your honeymoon traipsing through dirty hostels? Wouldn't a nice resort be more appropriate? You want to be well-rested to start a new life as a wife." I bit my tongue and assured her that Tanner and I were excited about our plans. But her words stung, implying once again that my idea of a good time wasn't proper for a wife. The undermining didn't stop at wedding planning. Tanner's parents seemed determined to question every aspect of our relationship and future plans. One Sunday afternoon, we were invited over for lunch. As we sat around the dining table, Samuel cleared his throat and fixed Tanner with a serious look. "Son," he began, "your mother and I have been thinking. Don't you think it's time you considered a job that's more stable? Something that would allow you to support a family properly?" Tanner looked confused. "Dad, I love my job, and I make more than enough to support us." Margaret jumped in. "But dear, what about when China inevitably decides to stay home with the children? You'll need to be able to support everyone on just your income." I nearly choked on my water. "Excuse me?" I said, trying to keep my voice level. "But we haven't decided anything about children yet, and if we do have kids, we'll make those decisions together." Samuel waved his hand dismissively. "You say that now, but you'll change your mind once you hold your baby in your arms. It's only natural for a mother to want to stay home." The conversation devolved from there, with Tanner's parents outlining their vision of our future. A vision that involved me quitting my job, Tanner taking a more respectable position at Samuel's company, and us producing a brood of grandchildren for them to dote on. Tanner and I left feeling frustrated and invalidated. It seemed no matter what we said, his parents were determined to mold us into their idea of the perfect couple. As the wedding approached, Margaret's attempts to mold me into her idea of a proper wife intensified. She started inviting me over for cooking lessons, which inevitably turned into lectures about a woman's role in the home. During one such session, about 3 months before the wedding, things finally came to a head. As I awkwardly kneaded bread dough under Margaret's critical gaze, she launched into yet another speech about how a good wife should prioritize her husband's needs over her career. I'd had enough. I explained firmly that Tanner and I saw our relationship as an equal partnership and that I had no plans to quit my job after the wedding. Margaret's response was cold and cutting. "I'm concerned about the example you're setting as Tanner's future wife," she said. "A woman's primary role should be supporting her husband and caring for the home. I know you have this job, but surely you plan to quit once you're married. Tanner makes more than enough to support a family." I was speechless for a moment, struggling to process her words. Did she really expect me to give up my entire career just because I was getting married? The conversation quickly devolved from there, with Margaret insisting that I needed to reconsider my priorities if I wanted to be a good wife and mother. When Tanner and Samuel returned home, the tension was palpable. Over lunch, Samuel and Margaret tag-teamed their disapproval, expressing their concerns about our future together. They argued that I wasn't cut out to be the kind of wife Tanner needed, that my career focus would make me a terrible mother, and that Tanner deserved a traditional wife who would put him first. Tanner defended me vehemently, but the damage was done. We left abruptly, with Tanner declaring that he wouldn't tolerate their disrespect towards me In the car, he apologized profusely for his parents' behavior. "I'm so sorry," he said, pulling me into a hug. "I had no idea they would attack you like that. Are you okay?" I assured him I would be, but inside I was reeling. The incident with his parents was just the latest in a long string of undermining comments and actions, but it was by far the most blatant attack on our choices and our relationship. The weeks that followed, Samuel and Margaret's campaign against our modern relationship intensified. They began reaching out to Tanner separately, trying to persuade him to reconsider the marriage. They sent him articles about the dangers of dual-income households and the importance of having a stay-at-home mother. Margaret even went so far as to introduce Tanner to the daughter of one of her church friends, a young woman who had recently graduated from culinary school and was looking to settle down and start a family. When Tanner told me about this, I was furious. It was clear his mother was trying to present an alternative, a proper wife who fit her traditional mold. The situation reached a new low when Tanner's parents decided to throw us an engagement party. We were initially touched by the gesture, thinking perhaps they were finally coming around to accepting our relationship. How wrong we were. The party turned out to be less of a celebration and more of an ambush. Margaret had invited all of their conservative friends and family members, effectively creating an echo chamber of traditional values. Throughout the evening, we were bombarded with intrusive questions and unsolicited advice. One of Margaret's friends cornered me by the buffet table. "So, dear," she said, eyeing me critically, "I hear you're quite the career woman. Don't you worry that your ambition might make it difficult to be a good wife to Tanner?" Before I could respond, another guest chimed in. "Oh, yes, it's so important for a wife to be available to her husband. My daughter-in-law tried to keep working after she got married, and it nearly ruined their relationship. Thank goodness she came to her senses and quit her job." I looked around desperately for Tanner, feeling overwhelmed and out of place. I finally spotted him across the room, trapped in a similar conversation with his father and some other older men. "Tanner, my boy," I overheard Samuel saying, "you need to take control of your household. A man who lets his wife work is seen as weak. You don't want people thinking you can't provide for your family, do you?" Tanner's face was a mask of barely concealed frustration. "Dad, China's career is important to her, and I support her completely. Our relationship is a partnership." By the time we managed to extract ourselves from the party, both Tanner and I were emotionally drained. In the car ride home, we sat in stunned silence for several minutes before Tanner finally spoke. "I can't believe they did that," he said, his voice tight with anger. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I had no idea they would turn our engagement party into some kind of intervention." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "It's not your fault, but we need to do something about this. We can't let them keep undermining our relationship like this." The final straw came about a month before the wedding. Tanner and I had decided to have a traditional registry, instead asking guests to contribute to a fund for a down payment on a house. We thought it was a practical choice, given that we both already had established households. Samuel and Margaret were appalled. They insisted that a proper bride needed a full set of china, crystal, and silver. Without consulting us, they set up a registry at an expensive department store filled with ridiculously overpriced items we had no use for. When we found out, Tanner and I were livid. We immediately canceled the unauthorized registry, but the damage was done. Several of their friends had already purchased gifts, and now we had to deal with the awkwardness of returning them and explaining the situation. To make matters worse, Margaret took it upon herself to help with the wedding planning by making changes without our consent. She switched our modern minimalist invitations for frilly traditional ones. She tried to change our venue from the rustic barn we love to a stuffy country club. She even attempted to book a string quartet to replace the DJ we had hired. Each time we discovered a change, we had to scramble to undo it and reaffirm our original plans. It was exhausting and frustrating, adding unnecessary stress to an already hectic time. It was then that Tanner and I realized we needed to take a firm stand. We sat down and had a long, difficult conversation about boundaries and what our future would look like. The next day, we invited Samuel and Margaret over to our apartment. Tanner took the lead. His voice was firm as he addressed his parents. Mom, Dad, China, and I have something to say, he began. We love you, but your behavior lately has been unacceptable. You've consistently disrespected China and our choices as a couple. I chimed in. We understand that you have certain ideas about marriage and gender roles, but those aren't our values. I'm not going to quit my job or become a full-time housewife. Tanner and I are partners in every sense, and that's not going to change. Samuel started to protest, but Tanner cut him off. This isn't up for debate. If you can't accept our relationship for what it is, then you won't be part of our lives moving forward. That includes not coming to the wedding. Margaret burst into tears, accusing us of breaking her heart. Samuel's face turned red with anger as he sputtered about ungrateful children and the breakdown of traditional values. But we stood our ground. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, watching Tanner potentially sever his relationship with his parents. But I knew it was necessary for our future happiness. In the end, Samuel and Margaret left our apartment in a huff, saying they needed time to process our ultimatum. The weeks leading up to the wedding were tense, with minimal contact from Tanner's parents. During this time, we faced yet another challenge. Tanner's sister, who had initially been supportive of our relationship, began to waver under pressure from their parents. She called Tanner one evening, clearly upset. "Tanner, I don't know what to do," she said, her voice trembling. "Mom and Dad are saying that if I stand up for you at the wedding, I'm betraying our family values. They're threatening to cut me off financially if I participate." Tanner was furious, but tried to remain calm for his sister's sake. "You're an adult. You need to make your own decisions. But know that if you choose not to be part of our wedding, it will seriously damage our relationship." In the end, his sister chose to stand with us. But the fact that Tanner's parents had tried to manipulate her added another layer of hurt to an already painful situation. 3 days before the ceremony, we finally received a message from Samuel and Margaret. They apologized somewhat stiffly for their behavior and asked if they could still attend the wedding. We agreed on the condition that they respect our choices and refrain from any further attempts to change our minds. The wedding day itself was beautiful, if a bit awkward at times. Samuel and Margaret were cordial but reserved. I caught Margaret tearing up during the ceremony, though whether from joy or disappointment I couldn't tell. During the reception, I overheard Margaret talking to one of her friends. "Well, it's not exactly the wedding I would have chosen," she said with a sigh, "but I suppose we have to support their decisions even if we don't agree with them." It wasn't a ringing endorsement, but it was a start. It's been 2 years since that day, and things with Tanner's parents have improved slowly but steadily. They're come to accept, not fully embrace, our modern marriage. Margaret still occasionally slips and makes comments about when I'll settle down to have kids, but Tanner is quick to shut that down. We have had to navigate some tricky situations, like when I received a big promotion at work that involved more travel. Samuel made a snide comment about how Tanner must feel abandoned by his wife, but Tanner proudly talked about how my success was our success as a couple. There was also the awkward Christmas dinner where Margaret gifted me a stack of cookbooks and homemaking guides, clearly still holding out hope that I'd embrace a more traditional role. Tanner and I exchanged knowing glances, but chose not to make an issue of it, instead focusing on enjoying the holiday together. As for us, we're happier than ever. Both our careers are thriving, and we're true partners in every sense of the word. We split household chores, support each other's goals, and make decisions together. And yes, we're still planning for kids in the future on our own terms and timeline. We've learned to set firm boundaries With Tanner's parents, we limit our visits and are quick to shut down any attempts to undermine our choices. It's not always easy, but it's necessary for our mental health and the strength of our relationship. Looking back, I'm proud of how we handled the situation with Tanner's parents. It wasn't easy, but by standing firm in our values and presenting a united front, we set the tone for our marriage. We showed them and ourselves that we're committed to each other and to the life we've chosen to build together, regardless of outdated expectations or societal pressures. Our journey hasn't always been smooth, but it's been ours. We've faced challenges together, from dealing with disapproving family members to navigating the ups and downs of two demanding careers. Through it all, we've grown stronger as a couple, learning to communicate better, support each other unconditionally, and always prioritize our relationship. We've also found unexpected allies along the way. Tanner's sister, having seen how happy we are together, has become one of our strongest supporters. She's even started to question some of the traditional values she was raised with, inspired by our relationship. As we look to the future, we're excited about the life we're building together. We're saving for a house, planning exotic vacations, and yes, talking about starting a family when the time is right for us. We know that whatever challenges come our way, we'll face them as a team. And at the end of the day, that's what matters most. Our love story may not fit the traditional mold, but it's authentic, it's ours, and we wouldn't have it any other way. Here are my thoughts about the story. So, we've got this couple, right? Tanner and China are your typical modern lovebirds. Met cute, fell hard, decided to tie the knot. Sounds like a Hallmark movie so far, doesn't it? Well, hold on to your delicate hats, because this is where the wheels come off the happy wagon. Enter Tanner's parents, Samuel and Margaret. Holy guacamole, folks. These two are like a pair of time travelers straight out of the 1950s, complete with outdated views and a metric ton of judgment. I swear, reading about Margaret made me want to check my calendar to make sure we hadn't somehow slipped back in time. Don't get me wrong, having some traditional values isn't inherently a bad thing. It does become a problem, though, when you try to push those values onto other people to the point where it becomes borderline harassment. Now, I've read through story after story and have been more than well exposed to my fair share of overbearing in-laws. But Tanner's parents take the cake, frost it, and smash it in China's face. The constant undermining, the snide comments, the not-so-subtle attempts to mold China into their idea of the perfect wife. It's like watching a car crash in slow motion. You want to look away, but you just can't. This is exactly what happens when your only friends and inner circle just keep echoing your own beliefs back at you. No matter what you believe in, a little bit of doubt, debate, and disbelief will go a long way in curbing any potential narcissism or rudeness. And can we talk about that engagement party for a hot second? Holy moly, talk about an ambush. I was half expecting them to wheel out a priest and try to perform an exorcism on China's career aspirations. The audacity of these people, am I right? I mean, who throws an engagement party just to shame the bride-to-be? That's some next-level passive-aggressive BS right there. But here's the thing that really got me. Tanner's reaction. Now, I've seen a lot of stories where the partner just rolls over and lets their family walk all over the significant other. Not our boy Tanner, though. He stood up to his parents like a boss, and I gotta say, I was cheering him on from my reading nook. It took some serious inner will to stand up to your folks like that, especially when they're as stubborn as a mule with its hooves super glued to the ground. China? Man, this woman got patience. Would make a saint look twitchy. If it were me, I would have gone full bridezilla on their outdated butts after the first snide comment. But China, she handled it all with grace and fire. She's like a modern-day June Austen heroine. But instead of navigating ballrooms and marriage proposals, she's dealing with career-shaming in-laws and surprise registries. The whole situation with Tanner's sisters, that's some prime manipulation right there. Using money to control your kids, using one kid to control your other kid. That's not parenting, that's emotional blackmail. I'm glad she chose to stand with Tanner and China in the end. Family should be about love and support, not control and conformity. As I was reading this story, I couldn't help but think about how many couples out there are probably dealing with the same situations. It's 2024, for crying out loud. You'd think we'd be past this whole "a woman's place is in the home" nonsense. But nope, here we are, still fighting the same battles our grandmothers fought. If a woman wants to be a homemaker, great for her. But I think it's far past the point where we start forcing and pressuring women into a lifestyle she doesn't want. No?
And now, guys, we will move on to the second story of the video. Please like the video if you have enjoyed it so far. The story starts like this.
My stepmother tried to cut me out of my father's will. I guess I should start at the beginning. My dad, Michael, was always larger than life to me. He was a successful businessman who built his company from the ground up, turning a small tech startup into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. But more than that, he was just a great father. Even when work kept him busy, he always made time for me. We'd go fishing on weekends, tinker with old cars in the garage, or just hang out watching terrible sci-fi movies and laughing at the cheesy special effects. My mom passed away when I was 12, and for a few years, it was just Dad and me against the world. We were a team, and I think going through that loss together brought us even closer. But when I was 16, Dad met Vanessa. At first, I was happy for him. Vanessa seemed nice enough, always smiling and trying to include me in conversations. She was quite a bit younger than Dad, maybe 15 years or so, but I figured if she made him happy, that was what mattered. They got married after dating for about a year, and I tried my best to welcome her into our family. But as time went on, I started to notice changes. Vanessa became less interested in including me and more focused on having Dad all to herself. She'd plan fancy dinners or weekend getaways that conveniently didn't include me. When I tried to talk to Dad about work or school, she'd interrupt me with some trivial matter that apparently couldn't wait. I chalked it up to normal step-family adjustment at first. After all, it couldn't be easy coming into an established father-son relationship. But as the years went by, the distance between Dad and me grew. Our fishing trips became less frequent, then stopped altogether. Our marathon movie nights were replaced by cocktail parties with Vanessa's friends. I went off to college, and while Dad still paid for my tuition and expenses, our conversations became shorter and less frequent. Whenever I'd come home for breaks, Vanessa always seemed to have some reason why Dad couldn't spend much time with me. He was busy with work, or they had social obligations, or he wasn't feeling well. It was during one of these visits home that I first noticed something truly odd about Vanessa's behavior. I had arrived unexpectedly, hoping to surprise Dad for his birthday. When I walked into the house, I heard Vanessa on the phone in Dad's study. "Yes, I understand," she was saying in a low, urgent voice. "But we need to move faster. He's starting to ask questions about the offshore accounts." I froze, not wanting to eavesdrop but unable to move away. Offshore accounts? What was she talking about? "Look, just get it done," Vanessa continued. "I don't care how, just make sure it's untraceable. We can't afford any slip-ups now." I heard her hanging up the phone and quickly moved away, pretending I had just arrived. When Vanessa came out of the study, she seemed startled to see me. "Mason, what a surprise," she said, her voice a little too high-pitched. "We weren't expecting you." "I wanted to surprise Dad for his birthday," I explained, watching her carefully. "Oh, how thoughtful," Vanessa said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Unfortunately, your father's tied up in meetings all day. Maybe we can do dinner tomorrow?" I nodded, disappointed but not surprised. It was becoming the norm rather than the exception. After I graduated and started my own career in marketing, I made an effort to stay connected with Dad. I'd call regularly, try to set up dinners or meet for lunch near his office, but more often than not, Vanessa would answer the phone and make excuses for why Dad couldn't talk, or she'd show up to our lunch meetups, dominating the conversation and steering it away from any meaningful topics. During one of these rare lunches with Dad, I noticed he seemed distracted and a bit confused. When I asked him about a recent business decision I've read about in the news, he looked blank for a moment before Vanessa jumped in. "Oh, Michael's been too busy lately. He probably doesn't remember every little detail," she said with a laugh. "Why don't you tell Mason about our upcoming vacation instead, dear?" Dad nodded, seeming relieved, and launched into a description of their planned trip to the Maldives. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Dad, I knew, would never forget details about his business. I started to feel like I was losing my dad, but I didn't know how to fix it without seeming like a whiny, jealous kid. So I just tried to make the best of the situations I could, cherishing the rare moments when I got Dad to myself. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was at work when I got the call. Dad had suffered a massive heart attack. By the time the ambulance got to him to the hospital, it was too late. He was gone. The world seemed to stop. I couldn't believe it. My dad, my hero, the man who had always seemed invincible to me, was just gone. I left work in a daze and drove to the hospital. My mind a whirlwind of memories and regrets, all those missed opportunities, all those times I should have pushed harder to see him. When I got to the hospital, Vanessa was already there. She was crying, mascara running down her face, surrounded by a group of her friends who were comforting her. I felt like an outsider, standing there awkwardly, not sure what to do or say. Vanessa looked up and saw me. For a moment, I thought I saw a flash of annoyance cross her face, but it was quickly replaced by a grief-stricken expression. She came over and hugged me, and I hugged her back, both of us united for a moment in our loss. The next few days were a blur of funeral arrangements, phone calls, and paperwork. I threw myself into helping with the preparations, partly because I felt it was my duty as Dad's son, and partly because staying busy kept me from falling apart. Vanessa seemed content to let me handle most of the details, which I found a bit odd, but I figured everyone grieves differently. What I did find strange was Vanessa's insistence on being present whenever I was going through Dad's papers. She hovered over my shoulder as I sorted through his desk, claiming she was just trying to help. But more than once I caught her slipping documents into her purse when she thought I wasn't looking. The funeral was well attended. Dad had been respected in the business community and had a wide circle of friends. I gave the eulogy, sharing memories of fishing trips and movie nights, of the lessons Dad had taught me about hard work and integrity. As I spoke, I couldn't help but notice that many of the stories I shared were from before Vanessa came into our lives. Had we really grown that far apart in recent years? After the funeral, there was a small gathering at Dad and Vanessa's house. As people started to leave, Vanessa pulled me aside. "Mason, we need to talk about your father's will," she said, her voice low and serious. I was taken aback. "His will? Now? Can't this wait a few days?" Vanessa shook her head. "I think it's best we get this sorted out quickly. For closure, you know." Something about her tone made me uneasy, but I nodded. "Okay, when do you want to do this?" "I've already contacted Michael's lawyer," she said. "He'll be here tomorrow morning to read the will." The next morning, I arrived at the house to find Vanessa already in deep conversation with a man I assumed was the lawyer. They both looked up as I entered, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had interrupted something. "Ah, you must be Mason," the lawyer said, extending his hand. "I was your father's attorney for many years. Shall we get started?" We sat down in Dad's study, a room that had once been so familiar to me but now feels strangely foreign. The lawyer opened his briefcase and pulled out a document. "I'll keep this brief," he said. "The last will and testament of Michael James Thompson, dated 6 months ago." As he read through the will, I felt a growing sense of disbelief. According to this document, Dad had left almost everything to Vanessa: the house, the cars, his personal belongings, and worst of all, controlling interests in his company. I was to receive a small trust fund, barely enough to cover a year's worth of living expenses. This can't be right," I stammered when he had finished reading. "There must be some mistake." Vanessa reached out and patted my hand, her face a mask of sympathy. "Oh, Mason, I know this must be a shock, but your father wanted to make sure I was taken care of. You understand, don't you?" I pulled my hand away and my mind reeling. No, I don't understand. He built that company from nothing. He always said he wanted me to take it over someday. The lawyer cleared his throat. I assure you, this is the most recent will your father signed. It's all perfectly legal. I stood up, feeling like I couldn't breathe. I need some air, I muttered, stumbling out of the study and out of the house. I sat on the front steps, trying to make sense of what had just happened. This couldn't be real. My dad wouldn't do this to me, would he? As I sat there, fragments of memory started to surface. Times when I'd overheard Vanessa talking to Dad about the company, suggesting he should secure their future. Moments when Dad had seemed confused or forgetful in our recent conversations. The way Vanessa had always steered him away from discussions about the future of the business. I remembered an incident from a few months ago when I had stopped by the house unexpectedly. I had heard Vanessa and Dad arguing in his study. "Michael, you need to sign these papers," Vanessa had been saying, her voice uncharacteristically sharp. "But I don't understand why we need to restructure the company now," Dad had replied, sounding confused and frustrated. "It's for our future, darling," Vanessa had said, her voice softening. "You trust me, don't you?" I had walked away then, not wanting to intrude, but now that conversation took on a sinister new meaning. A horrible suspicion began to form in my mind. Had Vanessa manipulated my father? Had she taken advantage of him somehow? I pulled out my phone and called my best friend, who happened to be a lawyer. "Hey, I need your help," I said as soon as he answered. "Something's not right with my dad's will." He listened patiently as I explained the situation. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Mason, this sounds suspicious," he said finally. "If you really believe your stepmother manipulated your father, you might have grounds to contest the will. But it won't be easy. You'll need evidence." "What kind of evidence?" I asked. "Anything that shows your father wasn't of sound mind when he made the will, or that he was under undue influence," he explained. "Medical records, witness statements, financial records, anything that paints a picture of what was really going on." I took a deep breath. "Okay, where do I start?" "First, don't sign anything," he warned. "Don't agree to the terms of the will. Tell them you need time to review everything with your own lawyer. Then start digging. Talk to your dad's friends, his employees, anyone who might have noticed something off in the last few months." Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into investigating. I reached out to Dad's old friends, business associates, even his doctors. Slowly, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Several of Dad's friends mentioned that he had seemed more withdrawn in recent months, canceling plans and rarely attending social events without Vanessa. His personal assistant at work told me that Vanessa had started coming to the office more frequently, sitting in on meetings and offering her opinion on business decisions. "It was odd," the assistant confided. "Your father used to be so decisive, but lately he'd always look to Vanessa before making any choices. And she was always pushing for more aggressive expansion, riskier investments. It wasn't like him at all." I also discovered that Vanessa had been making frequent trips all over the country over the past year. When I dug deeper, I found evidence of large sums of money being transferred to offshore accounts. It was all starting to add up to a very disturbing picture. But the real breakthrough came when I managed to get copies of Dad's medical records. 6 months ago, right around the time the new will was made, Dad had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia. The doctor's notes indicated that while he was still capable of making decisions, he might be more susceptible to influence and confusion. Armed with this information, I confronted Vanessa. I decided to do it at the house, hoping that familiar surroundings might make her more likely to slip up. The conversation went about as well as I expected, which was to say not at all, and I felt more resignation than any actual surprise when Vanessa failed to show any remorse for what she'd been doing. I left the house feeling shaken but more determined than ever. The next day, I officially filed to contest the will. The legal battle that followed was grueling. Vanessa hired a high-powered law firm, clearly prepared to fight tooth and nail to keep her inheritance. My lawyer, a colleague of my friend's who specialized in estate litigation, warned me that these cases are often difficult to prove. But she added, I think we have a strong case. The medical records are particularly compelling. We presented our evidence in court, the medical records showing Dad's dementia diagnosis, statements from his friends and colleagues about his changing behavior, financial records showing Vanessa's increasing involvement in the company's affairs. One of Dad's oldest friends testified about a dinner party where Dad had seemed confused and kept deferring to Vanessa on questions about his own company. It was like watching a puppet show, he said sadly. Michael would open his mouth to speak, but it was Vanessa's words coming out. He also presented evidence of the offshore accounts and Vanessa's frequent trips out. While not directly related to the will, it painted a picture of financial manipulation that supported our case. Vanessa's lawyers tried to paint me as a greedy son, only interested in my father's money. They brought up every instance they could find of me missing family events or not calling often enough. It was hard to sit there and listen to them twist my relationship with Dad. But we had our own witnesses. Dad's old fishing buddy testified about how Vanessa had slowly isolated Dad from his friends. His longtime secretary spoke about how Vanessa had started screening Dad's calls and emails, deciding what information he received. The turning point came when we managed to get hold of security camera footage from Dad's office. It showed Vanessa going through his desk late one night, just a week before the new will was signed. When confronted with this evidence on the stand, Vanessa's cool demeanor finally cracked. "Fine," she shouted. "Yes, I convinced Michael to change his will, but I deserved it. I gave up my life to take care of him. Why should his ungrateful son get everything?" Her outburst sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Even her own lawyers looked stunned. The judge called for order, but the damage was done. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. He invalidated the most recent will, reverting to Dad's previous will, which split his estate more evenly between Vanessa and me, with me receiving controlling interests in the company. As we left the courthouse, I felt a mix of relief, vindication, and lingering sadness. I had won, but at what cost? The legal battle had dragged on for months, airing our family's dirty laundry in public and forever tarnishing my memories of Dad's final years. Vanessa stormed past me without a word, her face a mask of fury. I watched her go, feeling not triumph, but a deep weariness. My lawyer patted me on the shoulder. "Congratulations, Mason. I know this wasn't easy, but you did the right thing. Your father would be proud." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I walked down the courthouse steps, I thought about Dad. Would he really be proud, or would he be horrified at what had happened to his family? In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into learning about Dad's company. I was determined to honor his legacy by running it with the same integrity and vision he had. It wasn't easy. I had a lot to learn, and some of the employees were wary of me at first. But slowly I started to earn their trust. I also made a point of reconnecting with Dad's old friends, rebuilding the relationships that had been neglected in recent years. Through their stories and memories, I felt like I was getting to know my father all over again. As for Vanessa, I didn't see her again after the trial. I heard through the grapevine that she had moved out of the state, presumably to start fresh somewhere. Her history wasn't known. Part of me felt sorry for her, wondering if she had ever really loved Dad, or if it had all been about the money from the start. 1 year after the trial, I visited Dad's grave. As I stood there looking at his name etched in stone, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me since his death. And later, as I walked away from the cemetery, I felt lighter than I had in years. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it. After all, I was my father's son, and like him, I was a fighter. The experience had taught me valuable lessons about the importance of staying connected to loved ones. about standing up for what's right even when it's difficult, and about the complexities of family relationships. I knew that moving forward, I would approach my relationships with more awareness and appreciation, never again taking for granted the time I had with those I cared about. Running Dad's company also gave me a new perspective on his life and the sacrifices he had made. There were long nights and stressful decisions, but also the satisfaction of continuing something he had built from the ground up. In a way, I felt closer to him now than I had in the years before his death. As I drove home from the cemetery, I made a mental note to call my best friend, the lawyer, and thank him again for his initial advice. Without his guidance, I might never have had the courage to fight for what was right. I also thought about reaching out to some of Dad's old employees who had retired to see if they'd be interested in mentoring programs for new staff. It seemed like a fitting way to honor Dad's memory and ensure his approach to business lived on. The sun was setting as I pulled into my driveway, casting long shadows across the yard. As I got out of the car, I paused for a moment, looking up at the sky. Life had thrown me a curveball, all right, but I had faced it head on, just like Dad would have wanted. And whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I was ready to face them too. Here are my thoughts about the story. Vanessa, woman, ma'am. Man, talk about a gold digger with a PhD in manipulation. The way she slowly wormed her way into Mason's dad's life, isolating him from his son and friends. It's like watching a python slowly squeeze its prey. You know it's happening, but you can't look away. And the offshore accounts, the secret phone calls, I was half expecting her to pull off a mask, Scooby-Doo style, and reveal she was actually an international crime lord or something. But what really got me was Mason's journey. At the beginning, I'll be honest, I was kind of frustrated with him. Like, dude, can't you see what's happening? But then I got to thinking about my own family, and yeah, it's not always easy to spot these things when you're in the middle of it. It's like trying to see the shape of a forest while you're standing among the trees, you know? And let's give our boy Mason some credit. When he finally cottoned on to what was happening, he didn't just roll over and take it. He went full in, uncovered everything, and took his own stepmother to court for the sake of justice. But here's the thing that really stuck with me, the bittersweet nature of his victory. Sure, he won the court case, got control of the company, and exposed Vanessa for the manipulative gold digger she was, but at what cost? His family's dirty laundry got aired out for everyone to see, and he had to face the harsh reality that his relationship with his dad had deteriorated more than he realized. It's a stark reminder that sometimes even when we win, we lose something in the process. Mason got his inheritance and his dad's company, but he lost the chance to repair his relationship with his father while he was still alive. That's some heavy stuff, folks. This story also got me thinking about legacy, not just in terms of money or business, but in terms of values and relationships. Mason's dad left him more than just a company. He left him lessons about integrity, hard work, and standing up for what's right. And in the end, that's what Mason used to fight for, his inheritance. Giving your child all the money in the world will make them entitled. Giving your child all the love and life lessons you've accumulated over your own life will make them a paragon of good society.
Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you again tomorrow.